everyone, my name is Hannah Collison from Inspire Creations, and today I'm going to show you how to make Clematis Montana. Here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is make the buds, and I think we should make 2 of them. We've got time to do that, and we'll make a flower and we'll make a centre and some leaves as well. Let's start off with the buds, and the buds themselves are going to be on a 28 gauge wire. The 28 gauge wires, I've cut the length of wire into 3. So if you've got whole length wires, then if you just cut them into 3 fairly even sized pieces. And this, we're going to use a angled pair of tweezers just to bend a hook in the top, just like so. Okay. The hook itself, when you're looking at a ruler, is about just under 1/2 centimetre. So it's probably it's about 3/4 centimetre in length, but it's just enough so that your sugar will, your paste will anchor onto that part here. Now, if you haven't got 28s, you can use 26s. Okay, and let's just do a couple of those. If you're worried, actually, I should show you this because sometimes if you make quite a big bud, it's going to be a little bit on the heavy side. So if you are concerned, what you can actually do is tape a number of wires together. I'll just show you how I would do that. Alternatively, again, if you think it's going to be a little bit on the heavy side, the bud, then you can use a 26 gauge wire. 26 gauge wires I normally cut in half because we need them for length and strength. So we'll do one on each and see. Maybe we could make one smaller bud, one slightly larger one. Okay, and you can also tape these together. So if I show you how to strengthen, I prefer to add maybe 3 26 gauge wires and tape them down than actually using something like an 18 gauge wire, which is really thick. And of course, when it's really super thick, it's very difficult to bend it or curl it. And especially for the clematis flowers, they are quite bendy and curvy. So you want something that looks natural. So if you were making a super big bud or you wanted something for extra strength, then you could bring 3 of the 26 gauge wires together, level them off at the top and stretch, and then just position your tape underneath, turn it over, and then start to wind the tape around quite tightly, holding it at a very steep angle so that it only just overlaps the stem. Now, I've probably already confused you with what you're going to do. So if you haven't already, you want to hook one 26 gauge wire and one 28 gauge wire, unless you're making more buds. Okay. This is the bud. It's really quite cute. I like them. They're just cone shaped, quite fat at the bottom. So I'll show you how to make one of those. So if we start off with the larger one, which is just over, was about 1.5 centimetres as a ball. The smaller one is just under 1 centimetre. So we'll just warm this one up. Make sure you put this under cover so that it's not going to dry out. Warm your paste up so you know it's likely to be crack free. Pop it in your hand, roll really tightly between your palms. And then if you need to, because this is feeling a little bit sticky, I'm going to take a little bit of my corn flour just onto my finger. I rather put it on my hands than actually incorporate it into the paste. Start to use your finger and thumb to pinch out a point. Now I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you might be wanting to control the holding of the bud in your right hand. So try and keep it nice and fat. And when I'm looking at that, when it's made, the length is about 1.5 centimetres. So for ease today, what I'm going to do is burn that bud onto my 26 gauge hooked wire. So you can light a candle, or it's probably safer if you light a candle because you've got control over it, and we're going to burn something else in a moment. pop the hooked end of the wire in and let it burn. You just kind of, doesn't matter if it starts to burn, you want it to glow red. Then take care while you're inserting this, because you don't want to burn yourself, but you should be able to push that into the paste, and that will melt the paste and then immediately reset. So you've got this nice and secure on the wire. It just, although it's soft and we can still work with it, it means that this is going to hold while we're taping together or colouring. We've got a lot of manipulating to do, and just sticking it on with glue will possibly make it wobble and come off. So I'm just going to break off a piece of tape, place that underneath, because we want to get rid of this burnt part. Just come away from your board just in case it's going to take the charred part off as well, because you don't want that on your board. And then you can tape down. Okay, and I would tape about halfway and then break your tape off. I'll just show you the last bit of this. Use your cutting wheel, support the back, and start to roll the blade of the cutting wheel from the base, the fat part, up to the top and come across and off and over onto your finger. So you're almost cutting through at the top. This is going to, it's nice because it turns the tip. And we want probably, well, we've got 4 petals, so we want to try and divide this into 4 if we can. If you can't get 4, then do 3. So drawing up and come off onto your finger so that it cuts through at the top. It just looks much more natural. 3rd one, and then if you've got enough room, which I have, just divide. Don't worry if they're not too evenly placed. I've got my 4 lines on there now, and then in between, supporting the bud again, we just want to put some textured lines, which would be in effect the back of the petal. And the process for this is going to be repeated on the 28 gauge wire for the smaller bud. So this is the larger one on the 26. Now you will lose some of the texture, but as long as you've got some lines on there, that can pick up when we dust. Okay, so that is your bud. So for the centre, a 1/3 length of 28 gauge wire, bend a hook into the end of the wire, okay? And we need to attach a small amount of paste on here as a base for the middle, okay? So this part, the spidery bit that you can see on the outside, is attached to a centre ball. But that centre ball doesn't want to be very big. So I'm just taking my pre-coloured, slightly pink paste, and I want to create like a pip size. So it's about 6 millimeters in size. Okay, it's really small. You can make it bigger, but it is going to enlarge anyway, okay, because you've got the outer part going on. So we'll just set fire to our little hook again, get it to the point where it looks white and glowing, carefully insert the wire into the ball, and at this point, if you want to, you can blow your candle out, okay, because you don't need it anymore unless you're making more centers. So I'm now going to press just to make that into a bit of an oval shape. We don't necessarily have to close this up because it hasn't really made much of a big opening in there. And this is set enough, it's not dry, but it's set enough for us to be able to put the middle on. And this time we only need a small strip of tape because we've got petals going on around this once we've created the center, and that will give us more taping, more length to the tape. So just maybe break it off after about 1 inch. So you'd have 1 center per flower. For the centers, depending on how mature the flower is, they'd either be less stamens, more closed up, or more open. So we'll see how we go. with these, and you can do them manually. So if you haven't got a cutter, we can do them manually. I think I'm going to show the cutter, but I think both Esther and Alice today we're going to be doing yours manually, aren't we? Because you can't find them or haven't got them, or if they're on order. So this is from a patchwork cutter set, which is on the kit list. There's 2 Christmas Rose and one other, which I can't remember offhand, but you've got like a double one, which will give you 2, and a single one that will just give you 1. But you can do it by hand on your own as well. So when you use the patchwork cutters, you need to have a little bit of Trex, so white fat, some kind of shortening, okay, some kind of agent that you can grease up your board. Now, normally I don't do this, but what we actually want is for this paste to stick. And then we can, once it's rolled out, it will lift up nicely, but we do need it to kind of adhere to the board. And also we need it to come back off this cutter. So I just take a little bit of the grease, not much, you really don't want much, and then we can just grease onto the actual cutter itself. I'll show you this manually in a moment, but we'll just demo this because it's worth knowing, especially if we do subsequently decide to get the cutter. So you actually roll quite thin. Okay, now sometimes, like a pancake, the first one doesn't come out. So I'm going to peel that off. I'm actually now going to put some corn flour on there. But I'm keeping my grease on here, so corn flour on the base once you've rolled it out. Press down, make sure that it's well depressed, and then because it's now not stuck on the board, you can move it around. So really work it so that it's definitely cutting through. Take hold of the excess paste and pull that off. This we can reuse, so we'll put it in our bag. And then if you pick up the cutter, you'll notice that there's areas that look like it's really cut through, and there's other areas that feel like they haven't. So just use your finger or your thumb to bring the zigzag edge of the cutter through the paste, so you can see it's cut through nicely. Run your finger along the edge, doing the same. Okay, and once you've done that, you can take your cocktail stick, just dig into one end to peel the whole thing out. Rest it down onto your board for a moment. Okay, so you have got what looks like a comb, and if I just neaten off the pulled areas, this would be where I've dug the cocktail stick in. You've got some ready-made stamens. Now the more closed up ones, so the first layer, or for a less mature plant, they're going to be very upright and straight. So we don't have to do any more to this other than put some glue on it to attach to our little ball that we've made. So just drain off the excess glue, so you've only got a small amount on your brush. Paint a line. This is on the one side's kind of curved upwards, the other side's inverted a little bit. So the inverted side will be the inside. So run your glue along here, and then take your ball, press it onto the side, and then very gently, it's a little bit fiddly this one, you start to roll. It looks a bit like a crown. Okay, so we're just rolling. Use it all up, and then between your finger and thumb, very careful. I know that we've burnt the ball onto the hook, but because it's not dry, it could still come off, so we just need to be careful. So just press between your finger and thumb round the base. This part's not going to show because you've got petals going around there. You can bring them around a little bit. And then we want to close up this first layer. So you can't see the ball in the middle. Yeah, let's just try a different view so you can see that just a little bit clearer. There we go. Okay. Now the less mature flowers, you can just have one layer, and then the more mature ones is what I'm going to show you now. But as you can see, I've had a glue spillage, so let's just sort that out. So once you've got the first layer on there, you can prepare your second layer. And this one, the stamens start to open up, they look a bit more scraggy, a bit more natural. But I'm actually just warming it up between my palms because this has been left on the side. Ideally, if you're making a lot of these, you want to actually just store them, cover them up with plastic until you're using them. But they only have probably about 20 minutes under plastic before they'll start to dry out anyway. And I'm going to use the veining tool. So the technique now that I'm showing you would be used if you're doing them manually without the cutter. And all I want to do is just draw from the tip down. You could use, let's try, sometimes this is a bit sharp, but we'll just try it. So you touch the tip and draw in. And what we're trying to do is curl them just a little bit. So make them look a bit more natural rather than upright. To be honest, if you're not too worried about changing the look of these little fronds, you can simply just roll a second layer on, as I showed you before. So when you get this cutter, you'll know how to use it. So we'll just draw all the way down. It's actually really difficult to find the middle, bit fiddly, but you can see that's got a bit more movement to it now. And as before, we're gonna just take a little bit of glue. And for sugar flowers, I have my glue very watery, hence the reason why it oozed out when I knocked it then. For models, we use it a bit thicker. And we just go again. So I've glued, they're curling inwards, roll up like a Swiss roll. And then you just want to round off very gently because we don't want anything popping off. Of course, that little ball that you put on in the first place, like the buds we've just made, can be left dry for a few hours or overnight. If you need to speed dry anything, you can actually put your oven on low and just pop them in there. Lowest setting, if you've got a fan oven, put it on the lowest setting, and as you've put your flowers in there, turn the oven off, keep the door shut. Leave them for about an hour and you'll find that they will be a little bit drier than they were before. It just takes the moisture out. So now, can you see we've got this stunning collection of little stamens, which in a little while, when we come to colour, we'll colour these up. And if you want, you can open some of them or leave them all closed, however you want. You could put a third layer on, but I don't think we should. I think that's probably about right. It's very, very fine. Okay, we've got a little bit of the centre showing in there, so I could close these up before they dry. Now, I've just shown you how you prepare this without a cutter. So you don't have to worry so much about your greasing up of your board either for this. Take a small piece of paste, it's probably about 1 centimetre as a ball, and just warm it up. Roll it into a ball and then into a thin sausage. So it's probably going to be about 0.5 centimetre wide. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact because you're going to trim it anyway. Take your rolling pin, roll a little bit of width into it, and then lengthen it. Again, don't worry if this is really fat because you're going to mess about with it anyway. Nice and thin though. So the only difference between the cutter and this is just a longer process. So once you've got your strip, I've got mine's probably about 10.5 centimeters long, about 1.5 centimeters wide. Straighten off the ends because you know that they're going to not work. If you prefer, you can use a pair of scissors. This gives you a sharper cut. I would probably suggest you use a big pair to cut down the middle. So it's a bit like when you are cutting the tape. Remember as well that this will dry out on you, so you only have a limited amount of time. And then I take a finer pair of scissors and you've got to cut along. Okay. Now, it can be a bit time consuming. If you prefer, you can use a craft knife or a cutting wheel. The difference here is that you don't get the point. Okay, so this one, because it's cut zigzag, gives you pointed ends. If you want points, then you just want to go a little bit more fussy and actually mark in triangles. There's a couple of ways of doing this. Okay, if you're marking in triangles, then you can go back and take the bits, the cutouts out. So you can see you can either go straight or you could cut in the triangles. I think the triangles would look better. So I'll just finish this one off and I'll show you just how it looks rolled up. But the process would be the same. So you'd make one strip for the inner part to go on your little ball that you've made. And then you do a second one, which you prepare on the soft foam pad. This one is quite long, so I would think possibly you could get both lengths, the inner and outer, from here. So I'm just using my cocktail stick to help me pull out the inserted part or the cut part that we don't need. Sometimes it pulls off the wrong bit. Don't worry about that because once you roll it up, it won't show. Okay, so it's just a bit more of a time-consuming process. And if I show you on here what it looks like, I'm going to start rolling at this end, I think. So I'll flip this over. Just have the end that you want to start with on the right side for you. Position your little this one looks a bit strange, so I'm going to take it off. And then you're back to your pressing. Okay, I think it's better if we cut the triangles in, to be honest. And we want to close that up. It's not as effective, but it will work as an alternative. I'm just bringing the whole thing up so it closes up a bit more. It's okay. I think that's not as good. Definitely cut your triangles in. Okay. I'll just do my second layer on video, but feel free to start. You can make these strips wider as well. That might make it easier, especially if the ball piece that you've attached to the hooked wire is quite large. Maybe you need a wider piece. This feels a little bit difficult to handle. You could also just trim one straight edge, work on that, and then trim. And that way you've got something to hold on to. And of course, this strip is starting to dry out. I'm just going to do part of this, I think. It's like anything, if you've got the right gear, then you get a better result. Having said that, if it's a flower you're not going to make again, there are a lot of flowers that have got multiple stamens like this. I think I'll stop there, and then we'll just pull the excess bits out using the cocktail stick. Take your time to locate the bits that you want to pull out, otherwise you might pull the wrong piece. And to be honest, I don't think we can reuse this. It's quite dry now. So if you remember, when we used the cutter, the second strip needed a little bit of work with the veining tool. This one here. I'm going to use the sharp end, but I'm just going to give it a test because it's quite dry. I don't want to tear it. So it is working, it's okay. So the idea of doing this is you're kind of creating a little central vein in each of these fronds, and the pressure, the downward pressure, I'm holding my tool quite upright, is allowing or helping the tip end to curl. Need to straighten this up a little bit before we can glue. I feel like this needed to be just a little bit wider so that it does actually cover the side of the piece we're trying to make. So in hindsight, I'll do that next time, but it's just sometimes it's a bit of a learning curve, isn't it? This second one is going to make it look a lot better. Just keep them all level as well. And then we can just open it up in places. So in comparison with cutter, without cutter, there are some differences, but it's not overly obvious. So the next thing we're going to do is make petals. There's 4 petals per flower on the Clematis Montana, and they're quite easy to make. I'm going to use, it is a Clematis Montana cutter, so if you've got something else, you need to adapt it so that you've got something that is a teardrop shape before you yeah, pretty much a teardrop shape with the ridge through the center. Okay, so it might be a bit of a challenge if we've got a heart-shaped cutter, but we'll give it a go. So my cutter here comes in a set, but this one is just over 3 centimeters length. So it depends on how big you want your petals to be, but for this clematis, they're not overly big. We're going to use 28 gauge wire and the paste that has already been partially coloured with the pink. So I just take a little bit. Now, my best tip I can give you is don't work with a big amount. Just mostly about 1 centimetre will give you more than enough to roll out to cut one petal. And if you're cutting lots of petals in one go, make sure each time you cut a shape, pop it under plastic straight away. Okay, so it doesn't have a chance to dry. So here I'm just rolling my ball of paste and into a bit of a sausage, just using my finger. So you've got a bit of the length already. If you feel like your paste is going to stick, it's very dry today, so possibly you don't need corn flour, drop the piece of paste onto your groove and then press down with the rolling pin and just roll up and down. We know we've got the length now. A little bit of corn flour if you think it's going to stick, and now you can roll sideways. Normally I roll the width first, but whichever you're worried about achieve that first. So if it's quite a long petal compared to the width, then get your length first and vice versa. So just roll super thin onto the groove. And if you're nice and thin, you should be able to start to see the groove showing through, but also maybe some of the colour of your board. So it's translucent. And then we can just peel that piece of paste off and turn it over. That reveals a lovely thick groove, which we can then use to cut out our shape. Now, if you happen to have rolled the paste long enough to get 2 of these shapes out, just line the first one up the center right at the bottom here and cut that out with a good rub. Pull the excess from around. While it's still in the cutter, roll, kind of rub your finger across the edge just so it gives a clean cut. And then I've got a little plastic sheet here, but you could use an A4 piece of plastic, you know, like a wallet for documents or something like that. And that will be all right for about 20 minutes max under there. Now, because I've got quite a thick groove that goes quite high up, I think I could probably, with another roll, actually get my second petal shape out of there. So we won't waste that paste. We will go ahead and cut another shape. Probably going to turn it round because if I'm going to have a funny gnarly bit, I want that at the bottom where the wire is going to go. So that piece might be all right. I could keep it as my spare, especially bearing in mind it's not properly cut, but it might work for me. So I'll just put that under plastic as well. And then your excess you can reuse, but just make sure that you squidge it together so it's all airtight. Push it back against the main bulk of paste in your bag. And if you feel like this needs a bit of warming, I'm just sitting on it. I'm actually putting it under my thigh. Just keeps it nice and fresh and warm and soft under there. So take your shape out of the plastic and we're ready to insert the wire. The wire always goes on first or in first before you go ahead and vein. So when you're inserting a wire, if you put the ridge across your finger, so if you're right-handed, you'll probably want to put it on your left hand because the wire is the thing that needs the control. Apply a bit of pinching pressure between your finger and thumb and then push the wire in. Now, when you're wiring, because this is sugar, it's fragile. So I always want to push my wire to within about 2 millimeters from the top. It's really important you don't stop just in the middle. You've got to go almost to the end. Otherwise, if you catch the flower petal, it could break. And then we're ready to vein. Now, depending on what you've got, I know the veiner I've suggested that you get is probably bigger. And the reason for that is because it means then that you can use it for larger petals. So I've got a whole selection here, some that are larger than others. That one matches there. But I have got a small one here. You could use a poppy veinner as well. And if you're using a poppy veinner, then you would place the shape right in the center, so you just get nice lines all the way along. So a little bit of corn flour into the veinner, whichever one you've got. When you look at the veinner as well, there'll be a top and a bottom. So when I'm looking at this, normally petals that have got veins would have more raised veins on the back side. Normally that's the same for leaves, actually, with the leaves. Yeah, most of them are raised on the back and they're more indented on the front. So when I'm looking at these veins here, I'm feeling like this will give me more raised marks. So that is going to be the back. My one happens to curve down. So this is my back. And the ridge is going to be on the back. You don't want to see that, even though it'll be a little bit flattened. So we just turn the ridge to face down onto the veinner that's going to be the back of the flower. And then we can sandwich the other half on top. Put your weights as a fist on, so it's actually pressing down here onto the veinner, and just kind of close the book, if you like, quite firm, and release. You've put the corn flour on, so it shouldn't stick. The one thing you don't want to do is this, because of course you're gonna distort the wire and possibly the paste inside. And just be careful, because of course if you press too hard you might find that the wire will show through. And if you are finding that the wire shows through and you get annoyed with that, and you're quite a bit more advanced with the flower making, then you could actually put these on 33 gauge wires, which is much thinner. So we pull that out and we can see a little bit of texture. Let's just see if I can get a better view for you on here. So a little bit of texture. That's the back because it's got my ridge. This is the front. Okay, so it's got a bit of movement and texture to it. And then we're going to put this onto the foam pad to do the final bit of prep before we shape it. So drop it onto your foam pad. Take the large end of your bone modelling tool. You've got to be on a soft surface for this. If you're on the board, it's going to tear. So if your paste is tearing, just think, well, what surface should I be on? Now, with this, we want to fill the edge. So we're going to take just this part of the tool here. And mostly that's how we use the bone modelling tool, like a pen with the curve uppermost, okay? And we want to place this part here, the fattest part, onto the very edge of the paste. So you're then halfway on the foam pad and halfway on the paste, and you apply some pressure as you're drawing around. Now, if you feel like that's not making it frilly enough and you prefer something that's frillier, then you can use the smaller end of the bone modelling tool. Just put a bit of corn flour on there first, and if you press down quite firm, you will end up with something that's a bit more ruffled. Just try and avoid your holes. And with these, this is the front, this is the back. I can tell because I can see part of my ridge still. They are going to come towards the front. So I'm just going to take my finger and thumb and just curve slightly. Okay. And if you want to as well, you can just take a little bit of pressure on either side here, just to close it up a fraction, but not by much. We've got to be sure we don't close that up too much, because when we come to assemble this on the center, we want it to sit quite comfortably underneath. Okay, so a little bit of a curve, but not too major, and a little bit of close up here if it's not too dry. And that's your petal. So we're going to make 4. We need 4 for 1 flower. So as with the petals, we probably only want to work with about just over a centimetre ball of paste for each leaf you're making. It saves on the rolling out, and it also saves on the paste wastage, because it'll dry out if you keep rolling it out too many times. So a little bit of corn flour if you think it's going to stick. Make sure that you keep it nice and central in the ridge. run quite thin, same thickness as you did for the petals. So it wants to be as thin as a crispy aromatic pancake or phyllo pastry. Always peel it off and turn it over so that you can see exactly where the ridge is, so you know where you've got to line your cutter up. And line the ridge down the centre. If you've got a fatter part of the paste, then make that this bit here, which is where the stem's going to go in. So press down, give it a good old rub, pull the excess paste from around, and then you can save this bit. Now I've actually got a bit of excess paste up here that's not thin, so I think I could probably get another leaf out of this. So let's just roll that nice and thin, peel it off, turn it over, and we could probably get one of the small ones out of there. Whoops. So just press, give it a good rub. And then just make sure that you rub your fingers, because it just gives it a nice crisp cut, especially on the plastic cutters, because they have a tendency to be quite flat on this outside edge. And then we can pop the leaves into our plastic. So I've just got them under cover here, ready for when I am ready. I'm just debating with myself whether I could actually get a third small one, maybe the other way round. No, it's not going to work. So we'll screw this up, and that can go into my bag so that it doesn't dry out. So when you're ready, so you could actually cut all your leaves out in one go. And then when you're ready, just pull them out one by one. And we're going to use a 28 gauge wire to go through, same as before. So when you're inserting the wire, make sure the wire is dead straight. If there's a kink on here where you've used a pair of scissors to cut it, then turn it round so you've got the best end of the wire going in. Finger the thumb at the end of the ridge. Push and apply a bit of pinching pressure between your finger and the thumb. And then you move your finger and thumb up every time you push the wire in so that they are directly over the cut end of the wire. And you apply the pinching pressure to force the wire to stay in the middle of that ridge until you get almost to the end. So I'm about here. The video's gone a little bit blurred, so I'm just going to reset. Okay, so I'm about here. Taking the veiner. Now, this has actually got a CL in the middle here, which stands for clematis. And when I'm looking at this end here, so CL is reading those letters to me. This left-hand side is more dipped. When I press on that, that's going to be giving me raised veins. So that is going to be the back. So the ridge goes face down on the left-hand side, assuming that that reads CL. And then you can close up. So you could put this further up or down. It just depends on what texture you like. I think there's quite a nice bit of texture in here, so I'm just going to line it up so that we've got using the top half here. And then close it carefully so you don't dislodge the wire. Put the side of your hand on that, press, close and open like a book. Try not to wiggle, and then you can open that up to reveal the texture. And we need to just do a little bit of work with the bone modeling tool now. So this is the back here. I always work with the top of the leaf or petal showing. So I'll use my small end of my bone modeling tool, put a little bit of corn flour onto the end, and then just draw around the outside. It does take some of the vein away, but it gives a good effect. A little bit of closing here, and just a small amount of bending back at the top here. So now we've got, this is a fragile bit here, so we just need to be careful when we're putting it together and when we're colouring. Now we've got our leaf. Okay, and the large one, just show you that one as well. Take that out of the plastic. Again, find the straightest end of the wire. Push that into the fat end of the ridge that you've created, And apply the pressure between your finger and thumb. As soon as you feel it might be coming out, it's a little bit like showing elastic, then just stop, pull the wire back and reposition it so it stays exactly where you want, up to about here. And you don't want to see any wire front or back. The ridge is going to be the back side. So again, with your veiner, CL, the left side is the back side. The ridge will go face down on the back side, and that cutter should just fit within. You could, at a push, use the rose leaf veiner, which will give you a similar effect. The veins are a little bit close, so what I'm probably going to do is show you how to adapt a petal veiner and maybe put the veins in manually, so that you get a better texture. This one certainly is coming out beautiful. I always think it looks a bit like a cabbage leaf texture, especially on the back. So popping that onto the foam pad, and then it doesn't matter which end of the bone modeling tool. If you find that's too small and you're worried about tearing the leaf, then you can work just with the big end of the bone modeling tool, half on, half off. It's a pinching action which is only on the edge of the leaf or the petal. So a little bit of ruffle. Just going to reset my camera. It's because I'm close and far. So a little bit of a ruffle, and then this is the top here. Finger and thumb, curl it backwards a little bit. So with the petals, you curl them forwards. These ones, we're going to curl backwards. Just close up a little bit at the base where the wire's gone in, and then just tweak the tips of the leaf to make it look realistic. Now each one of these is going to have a twist of tape about that long on it. Okay, so just an inch again. So showing you, if you have got just your petal cutter, you're going to turn it round. So the wire itself is going to go into the fat end. We'll just get a little bit of green paste, again about 1 centimetre's worth. We don't need a huge amount. Roll that out onto your board, so get the length and the width nice and thin. A bit of corn flour. It can stick to the board as long as you are able to pull it back off again. And you'll know, especially if it's humid, that you might just want a bit more corn flour than normal. Peel that off and then line it up so the tip of the leaf is in the center and you've got the middle lined up here as well. This is where the wire is going to go. Whoops. Try, if you can, to run your finger around the edge of the cutter. What that does is gives you a clean cut. So if you're getting furry edges, that's the only way really that you can get rid of them, is to rub carefully so you don't cut yourself. Okay, so we've got two really nice leaves which look lovely just as they are, but we want a bit of a serrated cut in them. And I would do that with a pair of scissors. So when you're looking at this one or this one, they've got like a nick coming out. So we want to cut in a nick. I'm going to pick one of these shapes up and turn it so that the point is facing me. And then if I come in with the scissors, follow the contour of the leaf while you're doing this. So kind of cut and curve in a little bit. And then just a little bit tilt outwards to cut that little point in. Okay, and here I feel it's always better if you try not to do them directly opposite, come down just slightly. So follow the contour of the leaf, so line it up parallel basically, and then you come in a little way and curve. That cuts the snip, and then you want to take your triangle out. So you can achieve the same shape just using a plain rose petal cutter. Insert the wire in the same way. It's a 28 gauge wire. If you find that the paper starts to unravel on the wire, turn the wire as you insert it so that it doesn't pucker up inside. And if you're turning it the right way, it should wrap the paper back round the wire. up to about here. Now, if you haven't got a veiner, or you've only got maybe, if the raised vein is not working for you because the texture is too close, it depends again how correct you want this to be, because of course, you know, most people won't know what the clematis leaf looks like. Any veiner, the back, we need to flatten this ridge. Okay, so just pop that in, bit of corn flour if you think it's going to stick, and any veiner that you've got, press it into the back so that it flattens the ridge a little bit. Then bring in your foam pad, turn it over so that the ridge is on the face down, and you're going to take your veining tool now and texture. So we know it's got a central line, so we're going to use the sharp end of the veining tool. Try not to press down too hard because you might find that this ridge will cut through. Support the leaf. Draw a light line through the center. Then we're going to turn out a little bit. So from the center line out, come up a little way, do the same again. Up a bit more, do the same again. Maybe one just here, and possibly one here. So you've got widely spaced texture. Okay, and then you're back to using your bone modeling tool, and because this happens to be a smaller shape, I'm just going to use the small end, and you draw around the outside, half on, half off, pinching. Pinch the base to close it up just a little bit and curl the leaf back as before. With a veiner, without a veiner. So there is a difference, but you know, at the end of the day, no one's going to really notice, I don't think. Most people don't have a trained botanic eye. So onto the colouring, which can be scary for some people, but actually this is what's going to bring it to life. I've got two brushes. One I'm going to use for just green. The other I'm going to use for the colours. So I'm probably going to start off by colouring my centres. Okay. And they can be a combination of kind of lime green in the centre and more yellow on the outside edge. So I've just got a bit of tissue in a pot. That just makes it easier for me to control the colours. They don't fly everywhere. And then I've got tissue on my surface, so I don't have to wash the surface, but also it enables me to use that tissue on the surface to actually kind of work the colour into my brush. So I'll take a little bit of my yellow, and we'll move the other colours out of the way. Come back to those in a minute. So just pick whichever brush you're going to want to work with your green. It doesn't matter if you've only got one brush. I'll talk you through how to clean the brush in between. So we take a little bit of the green and bring some of that yellow. Combine the two colours within the tissue in the little tray. I don't like to work off the back of the lids. I find that I can't control what I'm doing. It kind of goes a little bit static. And then I'm going to take that colour onto my tissue and just properly work that into the brush, a bit like blusher. We want to make sure we haven't got lots of loose colour. I'm going to take my little centre that we prepared, and avoiding the outer petals, I'm just going to very lightly, because you've got to remember that you have actually got wet petals and wet centres, just try and support it in any way which will mean that it won't come off the wire. So I'm actually holding the paste very lightly, and I'm just catching the brush in the middle there to green it up. Okay, and if you've got more than one centre, I would do that to those as well. And then we'll take, I'm gonna have to use a separate brush here for ease, but I will show you how to clean these in between. I'm just going to take my yellow again, onto my tissue to work it in like brusher, and that same center, very gently, just catching the edges outwards, just catch a little bit of yellow. So we're coming away from the pink color that was on them and making it look more like stamens. You could have made these in white as well, to start with if you'd have wanted to. So just catch the tips. So I'm just brushing from the side outwards. Okay, so now we've got some yellow on there. It shows I can see it more strong than you can on the computer, but just make sure that you've got what you like on there. Try not to make the fronds flick off. So that's your center. We can catch the sides with the yellow, so we'll just draw some of the yellow from the tips down, again as gentle as you can. So if you've got 4 petals and 2 centers, just colour the one center for the petals for this, so you've got enough time. Okay, so a little bit of yellow on there, and then to finish off I can go back into my lime green. I will make it look more realistic just to catch a little bit of that lime green on the base here. I'm not worried that it looks a bit like a Swiss roll on the back, because that will hide where the petals are placed. Okay, so the petals are going to go quite close to that area. So gently, if you're going to go upwards, just be a bit gentle because it could be loose. So just a little bit on the sides, barely see it. So continuing with that, actually no, we'll leave the green now. We'll go on to, we'll keep with the yellow, sorry. I want to catch a little bit of yellow on the side tops of the bud. The base is pink, but I just want to catch a little bit of yellow. Now, if you're trying to clean your brush, say you've only got one, then you're probably better off just picking a color. So maybe yellow is where you start, clean the brush, or actually yellow is where you start, move on to your green, clean the brush, and then move on to your pink, or you could go pink first. The difficulty is that you don't want to get the pink anywhere near the yellow or the green because it will go brown. Okay, so that's my bud. If you need to clean in between, so say I'm done with all my yellow now, if I just hold the brush upright and run it up and down to take the majority of the colour off, not like this because you'll damage the brush, but keep moving away until the line of colour is more faded, and you should find that you've got only a minimal amount of colour on there, and you should be able to go into your next shade. Because you can't wash your brush in between colours, it has to be dry to dust with it. So at the end of the day, when you're done with all your brushes and you're ready to clean, then I just put a little bit of washing up liquid in my hand, and then I would get my brush a little bit wet and then clean off my brush, rinse it, go again, until there's no more colour coming out in the suds. The suds should be white. And then you can just reshape your brush. I dry it just a little bit so that the moisture doesn't fall into this part here, and then I'd put this upright in a pot or a glass to dry overnight, and in the morning you can reuse it. But of course, for ease of demonstration, I've got 3 different brushes. Okay, so that's your bud. Might just do the other one. So if we get you to do that on the center and the buds, and then we'll come back to the pink and the leaves for, yeah, the green for the leaves. So we've got fuchsia pink and plum, and here I'm just going to mix the two to get a slightly more muted but not dull shade. I'll bring that onto a spare bit of tissue, just to help us combine. A lot of people don't like to use tissue because it's a waste. You can't really put that back in the pot, but I'm just careful with how much I pour out. And then we work that into the brush so that we don't end up with a lot of loose petal dust, which can be problematic when you come to assemble and put it on a cake. We don't want anything to, any loose petal dust to drop onto the cake. But also we can steam everything at the end of assembly, and that way that will help it. So I've got my pink on my brush, and what I want to do is start at the base here and work my way upwards. This brush is slightly curved, but a flat end brush would be absolutely fine. Support the base or the back of the flower a little bit, the petal a little bit, just so that it doesn't weaken as you brush. And always I start from the bottom edge or the top edge inwards. So you're not starting here and go out because you'll end up with a line. This way you get the depth at the edge and you get a blush of colour, a natural shading of colour. So depending on how strong you want that, that should be fine. On these, there isn't a lot of colour on the back. It kind of shows through with the light. So I'm only going to work on the front of these. Other petals, mostly when you look at flowers, they have more colouring on the front than they do on the back. Some have a shot of colour, so depending on what you're doing. And of course, the best thing to do is just Google a real image of Clematis Montana and then find the shade you like and go with that, because they do come out in different shadings as well. But this is very popular, very kind of a normal shade, if you like. We'll do the last two. Support the back. Draw the colour from the bottom edge. Sometimes you'll need to dip back into the paste of the petal dust, and other times you'll have enough on your brush. But just always make sure it's not loose. The only time you'd really daub the colour on is when you're working with the green and you're not worried about the quantity going on and you don't need to control, in which case you would definitely need to steam the arrangement once you've finished so that it doesn't go onto your cakes. So on the buds with the same pink, we would catch just the base here, but leaving kind of a midriff uncoloured. So it might pick up some of the blush, but it's not, you don't go all the way up to the yellow. And that's a good thing because we don't want the two colours to combine, otherwise you'll get a browny, dirty shade. That's what I call dirty colouring, which actually looks quite nice sometimes if you want a rustic look, but not if you want something that's precise. So you can see on there we've got pink to the background, pale pink to white, back to pale pink up the top here. And it's just the base. And while I'm here, I will also show you a leaf as well. So I'll just catch the base. So the buds don't have any green on them, and the centres don't have any pink on them. It's only the buds and the petals that have pink. Now, when it comes to the leaves, again, you may just want to move the delicately coloured bits out of the way, and then pick up your green brush. And we're going to add some black. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black into my tray. And we're going to take some of the moss green and combine it with the black and bring that onto, so it's quite dark. You could just leave these with a light dusting of moss green and nothing else if you prefer. And for ease, if you want to speed up your colouring, then just do a swish of dark green from the base up, a little bit like you've just done with your petal. Support the back again to make sure that you are not going to break the leaf or stress it in any way. And then just catch a little bit in the middle. I'm using my brush sideways rather than flat on. And when you do it like that, you can control the colour going up the centre. So I think from a timing point of view, if you wanted to work quickly, then that would be more than sufficient. And we can just do just a touch on the back. If you're colouring lots more, then just try and dust over the area that you've got the colour. Definitely dust over a tray or a tissue, because otherwise it's going to be an effort to clean your surface afterwards. And I'm not putting much on the back at all. So we've gone from this to this. Okay. So I'm just going to finish these green ones, and then I'll show you how to put it together. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to put the flower together. That's the most exciting bit out of it. It's nice to see something come together. So we're going to start off by clamping the wire really close up to the top, and then use your finger to push the petal and the wire back on themselves so that they are at a 90 degrees. The reason I do that with the tweezers rather than use the tweezers to bend is because when you bend with the tweezers, the width here will leave a gap. So it's not tight. So we're bending tight. Okay, so petal number 2, number 3, the same. So I'm just putting a finger on the petal and a thumb on the wire and bending it so the wire is really tight to the top here. Once you've got them all fairly horizontal, get your tape prepared. Now do be careful because of course the paste is still a little bit wet, even though it's quite a dry day today. So what we're going to do is sit one of the petals underneath the center so it reaches the stem, and you're going to do just hold that in whichever hand you find best. We're going to just flip over the tape and come as high up as you can, because everything needs to be tight up to the stem. If you need to, you can actually just give the center a tug to tighten this, but I would probably do that at the end once you've got them all in. The next one will go in directly opposite and twist. Now I'm not worried at this stage about trying to get any more of this tape up here, because I can do that in a minute once they're all on. If you keep trying to fiddle up here, the whole thing's going to fall apart. So as you add the next two, which are going to go crisscross because you've got 4 petals, 2 directly opposite each other, I can wrap my tape. You'll notice that the tape is down. Okay, so just get one twist of tape in there, pinch it tight, it sticks to itself. It's not sticking to the wire, it's only gluey to itself really. So as long as you overlap the tape, you should be able to get it to attach, and then put your last one in, which will be directly opposite. So you've got 2 and 2. Give it a twist so you've got hands free. And now if you change the direction of the tape so it's upwards, pinch as you tape up, using your finger just to help stretch the tape, and that way you've got a nice tight fitting at the top, and then you can come off there, just roll in your excess tape, and then you come back down to where you finished at the bottom. Keep all your wires straight so they don't twist around each other, and then you can continue to take down the stem probably to about 3/4 of the way down. Okay, if you find that you have not been able to get right up the top here and you're seeing lots of wire, you can take each wire in turn, avoiding the center one, and just give a little tug and move the petal down. But if you're going to do that, they'll all have to be done because you want them all in line, and just avoid using the center one, pulling the center one until you've got all the other ones down. It's just a bit scary if everything's wet. And then you can tip your petals up a little bit so that they look nice, and I'm just going to continue the taping on here. Okay, so that's how you get your flower together. The other thing you can do on here So I'm just tearing off. I've got a habit of tearing. I don't, if I pick up some of my colour, the mix of fuchsia pink and plum, just a little bit on my finger, and rub that, kind of pinch as if you're pinching and twiddling the tape, really. Just take some of that colour onto the stem, because when you look at them in real life, they've got a little bit of shading on there. Okay. Just gives it some interest. And we can do the same with the buds if it hasn't already taken it. You could also use your brush to do this. Okay. So with the leaves, I like to put these together in trios, in threes. Okay. So I'm going to take the smallest. Do I want? I feel I need to have just a little look at how this is going to come together now. I don't think it really matters, but aesthetically, how do I want it to look? I think it's going to look better with the big one in the middle if you've got different sizes, and that one slightly lower down. So that probably looks better. You can also, if you wanted to, you could pretend that you've lost a leaf and you've only got twos. So some of them can go in as twos if you want them to do. So this one's going to stay as it is, the big one, but the two small ones, I'm going to leave a bit of stem, because in real life they do have a little bit of stem showing now. So I've just bent it just about, not quite ½ centimetre, put a little kink in it. So one is going to bend to the left and the other one is going to bend to the right, just in readiness. It's just easier to have it all ready to put together, and then you're not picking things up and putting them back down while you're getting the tape. Then, having left a little bit of stem on the big one, I'm then going to add in one of my slightly smaller ones. Because you've got the tape, if you've given them a little press, they should stick together enough or long enough for you to be able to just put a twist of tape over. And I wouldn't even twist round with that. If you can just use your fingers to lodge that fold into itself so it holds, and then pick up your next leaf, come down just a little bit further. I feel some of them are directly opposite, but I feel like I want this one just to be a little bit further down on the side, or it could be on the top to keep the stem nice and rounded. And then we go round and tape down. Okay, so just put them together as threes. Tear off your tape after you've got about 3 inches of stem, and then very gently, because these are still a little bit wet, just arrange your leaves. You can, if you're being fussy, you can get your nail into the tape. Okay, and then that will just press any stretched piece of tapes that are still showing. You could even go one step further and take something that's smooth surface and actually brush the stem, and that'll take care of some of the twisted areas. And if you want as well, you can take a little bit of your pink from your brush onto the leaf, just to give it some interest. I'll just do that over my tray. Just take a little bit more so you can see, because it does look nice. Just on the tops of the stems though. It doesn't matter if you catch a little bit of the leaf, because again, as they start to turn, as they start to mature, you might find you've got a little bit of pink on the edge of the leaf. So it doesn't matter if you've got a little bit going on there. It just gives it more interest. So once you've got a bit of red on the stem, that is probably ready to put in. Okay, and I'll just show you as well. I want to curl my little buds, so I'm going to start just by curling it with your finger, and then if you want to curl a bit more, you can just press and close your tweezers a little bit. Not much, but they have got like a little curvy shape to them. Okay, so I'll just show you that again, because it's the same on the flowers as well. It's the way they're trying to wrap around and find their way around, climbing on fences, and they like to They definitely like to use other things to grow up against. And your flower as well would have a bit of a curve. So again, you can use your tweezers just partially open and tweak to close a little bit, just so you get this nice subtle bend rather than a sharp fold. So something assembled, like I'm just going to show you a small put together here, but something that is assembled into a bigger cascading arrangement. You would start off, your leaves are your lengthening, so you would put maybe a collection of 3 sets of the leaves that have been put together, and then you begin to add in your flowers. I'm going to show you just 1 flower, 2 buds and a set of leaves, but you can put them all together like that, and then this will be this one here and that one here and this one here, or you could have 2 flowers on it. What you want to do though is you start narrow, and then you want to concentrate on broadening. So the widest part on the main flowers are going to be here, and then you come back narrow again. Okay. And also when you look at it from the side, the idea is that you start off flat, but then you're coming up and then back down again. So you've kind of got an arc, height more in the middle here, width more in the middle. Yeah. But you could certainly put the spray that I'm going to show you, this arrangement here now that I'm going to show you, you could make them all up like this, and then have some extra sprigs of leaves on either end to give you the idea or the feel that it's cascading. So to put this finally together, I would, buds give you length as well. So I like to start with the buds, and I'd have the smallest one first, and I'd line that up so that I've got it raised just above the bigger one. And if we take a little bit of tape, we can put these 2 together here, because I want some stem. I want spring but not droop. And that 28 is just about done it for me. I wouldn't want to have this any longer because it might dip, and this one will go in shorter purely because I want it lower, but also if I make that as long as this one, it'll dip, it'll droop. Come down the stem by about 1 inch, and then if we push this back on itself a fraction, we can bring in, if I put that in behind, so the buds are going on top and peaking above the top leaf, because that's how they grow. And then twist a few times. I haven't got much of a stem for the leaf, got a longer stem for the bud there. And then I don't want to see all of this here, this ugly bit. So that is where my flower is going to go. And I've just got maybe 1 petal that's concentrated within that section there. And I'm going to have it just to the side slightly. And here I'm going to tape. And I would never ever, get my nail in there actually to help that join, never trim your wires. Tape everything up to start with and then start to put it together. And my best thing to say is, you won't like it to start with, but keep going with it, because you can always tweak and adjust. Walk away, come back, think I don't like that petal there, and just tweak it slightly rather than keep undoing and redoing, because eventually it will end up looking really good. Putting together is one of the hardest things. It takes quite a while to get to grips with, really. Okay. So you could, on this one, if you wanted to, you could put another flower in here, you could put another set of leaves, more buds, and that would kind of give you this wider arrangement in the middle. But that is your sprig, Clematis Montana. So I hope you've enjoyed the lesson today, and if you need to get in touch, my website is inspiredcreations.uk.com. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye for now.